Hello everybody, my name is Rachel and welcome to another wrap-up. Today I'm going to talk about all the things I read in the first half of August, slowly inching my way towards getting my wrap-ups back on schedule. So there are 3 books I'm not going to talk about today actually because they are all Otherwise Award winners, and I'll be doing an Otherwise Award winners batch wrap-up very soon. So those 3 books are Oku, The Inner Chambers, Volume 1 by Fumi Yoshinaga. This is the first in a manga series. Also Freshwater by Akweke Emezi and When the Moon Was Ours by Anna Marie McLemore. I also read a short story that won the Otherwise Award. I think it's called When We Dream in the Garden by Gabriela Damian Merevete, which I also enjoyed, and we'll talk about that in the future. On to the things I will actually talk about today. The first is Sunspot Jungle Volume 2, edited by Bill Campbell. This is the second part of a duology anthology that was published in celebration of Rosarium Publishing's 5th anniversary. Rosarium is a Black-owned SFF publisher. And you may remember that I struggled with Volume 1 a lot. I didn't particularly enjoy it, even though I think the quality of this anthology series overall is very good. It's just that the first volume had a lot of like dark fantasy, horror stories, a lot of more gruesome graphic content that I just flat out did not enjoy. Volume 2 was so much better for me. I feel like this one had more science fiction stories and some more authors and rereads and stuff in it that I just really enjoyed. There were a whole bunch of stories that I marked that I would probably like rate 4 out of 5 stars or something like that. One of my favorites was the P. Jelly Clark story, The Mouser of Peter the Great, which is not actually about a mouser, but it's a metaphor. Anyway, this was definitely a step up for me in terms of enjoyment from the first volume, and I'm really glad that I pushed on and read the second volume. Next, I read a nonfiction book called Twisted, The Tangled History of Black Hair Culture by Emma Dabiri. So I picked this up because I thought it sounded cool, like, oh yeah, I would like to read about black hairstyles and the history of these traditional hairstyles and stuff. And it turned out to be so much more than that. Dabiri basically takes you through traditional hairstyles and the politicalization of black hair to touch on a variety of other topics like racism, colonialism, slavery, even different concepts of time and metaphysics. It was fascinating. I'm so glad that I read this book. And there's also a lot about hair types and hairstyles and everything. A lot of the traditional black hairstyles are truly ancient, and I did not know that. We're talking about hairstyles that go back millennia, not like, you know, hair fashion trends of today that might last 5 years, but we're talking like 1,000 years. It's incredible. There are only 2 critiques I have of this book. The first is that it needed more visuals. There are pictures, but they were a bit difficult for me to see when I was reading the ebook version. I found myself stopping to Google a lot of images to see what the author was talking about. The second thing is not really a criticism, but more pointing out something that people may want to know, which is that I felt like Dabiri really flipped between an academic writing style and an academic tone and a more colloquial, slang-heavy, informal style. And I think this was probably done on purpose. I don't mind when somebody drops a meme reference or some slang into a nonfiction book at all, but there were moments where I felt like the shift between these 2 very different styles gave me a bit of whiplash. But once again, I think this was intentional, but some people may want to steer clear of academic writing, period. This does have some of that. A Fashionable Indulgence by K.J. Charles. This is a historical male-male romance novel. You may have noticed I've read a lot of romance recently, and that's because I just wanted light, fluffy reading that didn't take a lot of brain power. And it's a little bit ironic because I ended up reading some romance novels that have some really, you know, interesting, twisty stuff in them. Romance novels can tackle some really difficult subject matter and issues far more than I think non-romance readers may realize. Anyway, A Fashionable Indulgence is about a young man named Harry Vane. He was raised in a radical political group. His parents were radicals, and after they died, he's ended up at a printing press that does illegal materials, and they're constantly at risk of being arrested and flogged for printing sedition. But one day somebody walks into the printing press and is like, "Hey, Harry Vane, you're Lord Vane's heir. You get to pretend or learn how to be a gentleman and claim your inheritance." And he decides to do this, and he's very split between wanting to be true to his friends, the people who raised him, who took care of him, but are considered to be, you know, seditionists, and his new life as a gentleman because he has money and doesn't have to live, you know, in the gutter anymore. And he's taught to be a gentleman, the manners and the dress and everything, by Julius Norreys, a friend of Harry's lordly cousin. And Harry and Julius, they fall for each other. I really enjoyed that the broader plot of this story is more political and is more about Harry's loyalties and where he thinks he fits in between these two very different social groups. He's a very well-meaning, loyal person, and sometimes he's too good for the people around him. And also there wasn't a lot of angst in the romantic relationship. Most of the tension is caused by external forces, you know, external to the relationship rather than the two people feeling conflicted and rejecting each other or whatever. So yeah, it thoroughly worked for me. I enjoyed it, and this is probably one of my more favorite books I've read by K.J. Charles. Winter Garden by Pablo Neruda. This is a poetry collection translated into English by William O'Daly. I've been working my way very slowly through all the Copper Canyon bilingual editions of Neruda's poetry collections that are available, and this was another really, really good one. Neruda's poetry so far has absolutely worked for me. We'll see what I think when I get to more of his love poetry though, because in general, pretty much nobody's love poetry has worked for me. But this particular collection is very melancholy. That visual image of the winter garden is very appropriate. There's a bit of bleakness and homesickness in this, kind of Neruda looking back and pondering his responsibilities and duties and what he's done and what he hasn't done and what he longs for. I believe that he knew he was dying at the time that he wrote these poems, and he was living very far away from home. Not necessarily in exile, but just not where he wanted to be. It was really beautiful. It didn't delight me the same way that like the Book of Questions did, but it was very powerful and I really felt it. Next, a fantasy novella, The Order of the Pure Moon Reflected in Water by Zen Cho. This came out recently. It has beautiful cover art. Just look closely at that artwork. It is stunning. This is a story that just never took off for me. I went into it expecting to love it because I've really enjoyed everything else I've read by Zen Cho. And this, I think this might be a classic case of a novella not being long enough to fully explore and show you the world building and the plot. I wanted much more from it. In really simplistic terms, this is about a kind of former nun falling in with a group of bandits who are not as simply bandits as you might think, set against this kind of backdrop of war or civil war. And I never felt the characters, I never became attached to them, even though they were relatively interesting characters. One of the main protagonists is trans. The nun, Guet Im, is just very interesting. And then it took like this real left turn at the end. I didn't quite understand what was going on, and then it was over. And I wanted more. So it was fine, but it just never really soared. Then I continued reading the new Runaways series written by Rowell with volume 4, But You Can't Hide. I've been waiting for this one for so long to come in at the library. This one was very enjoyable. I felt like I liked it a bit more than volume 3, which I read so long ago I can't really remember when that was. But yeah, I liked this one a lot, got to see a lot of the characters in it. I do feel like the whole bit where Victor got his body back, it wasn't shown on the page. I was very confused. It felt like one of those things that like maybe that was a bit of a story arc that actually played out in a different related comic series. I don't know what was up with that. And a lot of it was also about Carolina and Nico, who are not my favorite characters. I tend to prefer like Gert and Chase, but overall it was good and I liked it. Then I read a comic that I didn't particularly enjoy, Smooth Criminals Volume 1 by Kirsten Kiwi Smith and Kurt Lustgarten. This is about like a cat burglar from the 1960s who's trapped and frozen in time and then accidentally revived by a small-time computer hacker in the modern day, and then they go steal something. I don't know. I did not think that the writing and the plot of this one was anything to write home about. It was very predictable. I liked the characters' personalities, but there was nothing about it when I finished it that pulled me back, so I don't think that I'm going to continue with this particular series. And then finally, I got around to reading Sleepless. I read both volumes 1 and 2. This is written by Vaughn, and the artwork, which is stunning, is by Leila del Duca. So this is set in a secondary fantasy world. It is about a princess, actually the illegitimate daughter of the former king, but recognized illegitimate daughter, who is trapped at court with her sleepless night when the new king comes to power, and everyone seems to think that she's a threat to the new royal family, like that she wants the throne instead. She definitely doesn't. All she wants to do is to go home to her own estate or to leave the country and go live with her mother. And oh man, I really loved this. Like, there are two big selling points of this for me. The first is that the artwork is beautiful and not quite like any artwork I've seen in another comic series before. And the second thing is that the cast of characters is so effortlessly diverse. The main character, the princess, is a black woman. Her knight looks like he's probably Persian or Arabic. A lot of the other characters are also people of color. And the families at the heart of the story, like the princess's family, are very diverse. I loved this. It brought this to the next level for me. It wasn't just beautiful, it was different. It wasn't just the sort of whitewashed medieval-esque fantasy. It actually was kind of set in a pseudo Renaissance Italy time period. A lot of the clothing looked like that. It was so beautiful. And the fact that I had just read a book on black hairstyles, and then we have a black woman with these constantly changing, interesting hairstyles in the story, I loved it so much. I've seen some people say that they think that the second volume of this was too short and that the story was wrapped up too quickly. I actually thought that both volumes were equally as good, but I could definitely see where the story could have been expanded to a third volume, and just give me some more, please. I wish that it hadn't been just a duology, because I could have stayed in this world with these characters for a lot longer. It's not perfect. It could have been a bit of a stronger ending, but I was definitely satisfied with it. And the last book for this wrap-up is another fantastic one, Clap When You Land by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is a contemporary young adult novel in verse. I've been hearing about Acevedo's books for a long time. They're talked about so much on BookTube, in particular The Poet X. I just heard people rave about these so much, and I thought I should try that. But I actually started with Clap When You Land because it's the one where the plot sounded most interesting to me. And I also decided to listen to it on audiobook purely because I have tried to read novels in verse before and I've never really gotten along with them, so I thought that listening to the author performing her own work would really bring it to life in a way that reading it on the page wouldn't for me. I was right. This was a wonderful way to experience the story. And this particular book has two narrators. The author reads from the perspective of one of the characters, and then another narrator does the other character's voice. So this book is about two teenage girls. One is Dominican American and lives in New York City, and one lives in the Dominican Republic. They discover that they are half-sisters when their father dies in a plane crash on his way to the Dominican Republic, and they learn that he had a double life. He had two families, one in America, one in the DR, and it is just this really beautiful, powerful story about grief and loss of a parent. And I think coming to terms with how someone that you love and you idolized was also a real flawed human being, and you can love them, you can be angry at them, and you can grieve for them all at the same time. I loved it. It was very much about family and how complicated families can be. And like, I got to the end of it and the only thing I could think was, this story was incredible. It was incredible. You should try it, even if it sounds like not your cup of tea. Like, I don't read a lot of contemporary YA. I was completely wrapped up in the story and I just had to listen to it all the way through. I didn't want to put it down. So that definitely ends this wrap up on a high note. I have all of Acevedo's other books on audiobook checked out from the library right now, and I'll be getting around to them soon. So let me know if you have read or if you want to read any of the books that I talked about today. Leave me some comments down below, and I'll be back soon with more videos, more wrap-ups. And until then, bye.